So today I'm going to be going through setting up a basic sport jet using the Advanced Radio SF16, the Smooth Flight 16. I kind of just dug through some drawers and found enough stuff to come up with parts here. I've got a set of retracts. I've got, of course, the SF16. I'll be using JR. So I've got the Infinite X-Bus receivers. I have what will be rudder, 2 elevators, 2 flaps, and 2 ailerons. This little guy will represent the nose gear steering, which would be normally in your retract, but for representation, this is how we're going to do it. Like I said, I'll be doing this on my JR Matrix transmitter, but all of my setup will pretty much apply to any type of radio, just to give you an idea. So I know several people that have tried to set this up. It's really not that hard, but there is a lot of screens and a lot of people get lost in the screens and lost in the setup and make it harder than it needs to be. So that's why I figured this might help. Hopefully you find this useful in your setup. So the first thing we're going to do is set up our transmitter and get everything assigned, all of our switches assigned and everything else. I'll post a picture of this as well. I'll probably post this on my Facebook page, and I'll have an image of this as well as my standard stick switches on my transmitter. Since I'm using JR, I can assign whatever channel I want to whatever, and this is kind of my basic program layout. I'm going to have 1 throttle, obviously, 1 aileron, elevator, rudder. If I'm going to use crow or flap bronze or anything, I do need to have a second aileron assigned. In this case, we're gonna not do that. If I did, then on my smooth flight, the colors represent channels that are mated to each other in the smooth flight. So if I wanted to have 2 ailerons so that I could have crow, I would put my second aileron on channel 5, and then in the smooth flight, I would move this second elevator out to, down at the end, or if you're not using smoke, you could put it down there. We'll go over that when we get to the smooth flight. So then I have my flaps, my brakes, my gear, smoke, whether you use it or not, I have it listed, and the same with lights. And you're always going to have gains. You want to have a way to turn your gains off. You need to do your maiden flight with the gains off. So this, we'll go through here in a minute. On the smooth flight, so the colors just represent which channel is matched to which. Okay, so now we're going to go over to the transmitter. So I'm a huge fan of setting up base programs. So this is actually my base turbine. So I've gone ahead and set up a program that will have everything set up that I need to do to, if I buy a new turbine, I can open this program, save it as a new file name, and I have everything assigned ready to start. And I always recommend that whenever you get a new radio or a new piece of equipment like this, just lay everything out on the kitchen table and figure it out before you start putting stuff in the airplane. It'll save you a lot of work later. So we're going to go into my base turbine here, and I'll show you that I have these channels assigned. I'm going to go to my monitor, and we can see we have our throttle. I've got elevator, aileron, all of the stuff that we need. It's all assigned here. I got brakes, I got gear, and I do set, instead of on a turbine, I don't do the trim up and trim down. I do an idle up and idle down. So what I'll do is I'll set my engine kill, which I have over here. That's killed right now. I'll set that, and I'll match my turbine to that setting, and then I'll do an idle up. So I idle up, and then I'll have that as high trim when I match my turbine. That way I don't ever have to mess with this trim. I just want to turn it on, and I can start my turbine, and then when I want to shut it off, I just hit my kill switch. Okay, so we've defined our channels and we've set up a program. We have all of our switches and channels, everything is functional, everything's ready. So now we're gonna go over, we need to get our radio talking to our smooth flight. So on the JR and most other transmitters, you're gonna use 2 receivers. On Spektrum, you're gonna use 3 specific receivers. You can contact them. I'm not a Spektrum aficionado, but they're SRXL or 2 SRXL, but you're definitely going to need 3 of them on Spektrum. So What I'm going to go ahead and do is put my transmitter into bind mode. Hit bind. And I'm going to start my power up. And it typically, let's see if we can see the lights. It typically will take one of the two. So it took this one, it's not taking that one. So what I'll do is just unplug that one. So for the second one, we've put it into bind mode. We've unplugged the first one that bound, and we're gonna do that cycle again, and it should bind the next one. It should turn blue. And there we go, now that one's blue. Now we can plug the other one back in and it will connect, so they'll both be bound. Okay, so there you can see we have two blue lights on, so we are now transmitting to the smooth flight. One thing I will add with respect to JR particularly is these receivers are obviously X-bus only. They're a complete full range receiver plus telemetry on each. But if you have a jet that's got a lot of stuff in it, it's compact, you just don't have a lot of good places for receivers, you can actually daisy chain an additional receiver. You can either plug another one of these in to there or just daisy chain another one of these off of here. You can plug in standard 03TL, plug that right into this guy, and then you'll have to rebind, obviously, that rebind that receiver, which will pick up this secondary receiver, and then you've got some redundancy. I will typically do that if I've got a smaller plane. I'll stick this guy way up in the nose and get the receivers oriented. Just kind of gives you some extra redundancy. Okay, now that we have our receivers bound, you can actually power on the smooth flight, and you can go in and you can click on the receiver and you can see the frames, and that is the frames that it's transmitting. It's not saying that it's losing frames or anything else. Drops and failsafe is where it's gonna, if it goes into failsafe, you'll get some numbers there, and same with frames dropped. With the JR setup, I have yet to see anything dropped. It's a very solid connection, but this is a good place. You can come in after your flight. You can, before you turn your radio off, you can come in here and kind of take a peek at what's going on. That might help you change the location of your receivers if you need. So we're going to go back, and what we're going to go into first, since we have our transmitter on, everything set up, we're going to go to servo routing. And we're going to go in and assign our channels according to that spreadsheet that I had showed where I had my input and outputs labeled. So we're going to go through that real quick. Okay, on this screen you're going to see positive and negative are going to allow us to basically scroll through our channels and make these correlations between the transmitter and like basically master and slave channels. So we're going to start down here in number one. Number one is our throttle. We don't need to match that to anything. Number two is right aileron, and we need to match that to number 13 for left aileron. So we just select that. And you notice if I scroll up and scroll down, it saves that as we go. So number three is my elevator, and I'm going to match that to 5. And we're going to go to 4. Which is rudder, and we need to match rudder to 14, which is nose gear steering. And now if I hit up, you notice channel 5 isn't highlighting, and it's not highlighting because we've already assigned that to as a slave channel to number 3. So if it doesn't show up, you don't have to wonder what's going on there. So number 6 is our right flap. We need to match that to number 12, our left flap. Number 7 is our brakes, and it's not matched to anything, but I am going to highlight it just so that it knows that 7 goes to 7. Number 8 is our gear, and I'm going to do the same there. I'm just going to highlight it. Number 9 is smoke. We're not using smoke. 10 is lights. We're not using lights. 11 is gains. I will just go ahead and assign that because it is an active channel on your transmitter to assign that switch. So 11 is just staying to 11. And then same thing, 12, 13, 14, it's not letting me do anything, so we've already matched those. So one thing that I would kind of like adjust or give you an option to is on monitor. So now we've assigned all these channels, but you can see that, like for instance, channel 5 is our left elevator, but if I move my transmitter stick, only one of the elevators moves. Same with aileron, etc., because the monitor is basically reading the channels coming in from your radio, not the channels that we assign. So we've already assigned channels over here and nothing's moving when I move my sticks. So don't get confused when you go to the monitor and it doesn't work. Those channels are assigned. It does save the routing and you're good to go. We just can't see it on that particular monitor. Okay, so I've taken a couple minutes and I've plugged everything into the smooth flight now, and so that matches my spreadsheet layout, and it matches my input-output routing, so everything should be functional. We'll go ahead and fire it up. All right, so now we should have two let's start here, two rudders for the nose gear steering. Got two elevators, ailerons, and flaps. Don't worry about the directions of everything. When we set up in the transmitter, we've set everything up at 100% travel and normal throw or normal direction. We can adjust all of the rest of that in the smooth flight. The only exception is if by chance you can't get enough flap on your plane, you may have to go back into your transmitter and set up more travel on that end of it. Because this is only going to output what the transmitter was sending in. So we can always boost that. One thing I didn't cover is that we set up our flap system in the transmitter. So I said in my case, I've got, it looks a little different than other transmitters, but I've got
landing flap,
different flap settings, and I'm using flight modes for my flap to elevator adjustments. So we'll go over that here in a few minutes, but definitely recommend using flight modes versus the old style of just fly it, see what it does, land, make a little elevator compensation for your flaps, and then go up and try it again. The flight modes will save you a lot, especially with a turbine. You just may not have, it may be extremely difficult to land it if the plane is wanting to rise up and you didn't put enough elevator in down. So definitely explore flight modes. We'll get to that here in a minute. So what I'm going to do, pretending that this is all going into a plane, is I'm going to go ahead and either program servos or mechanically adjust all my arms that are going to go into my airplane. Like I said, this is just for demonstration purposes, but you understand the purposes of setting this up on a table versus throwing it all in the airplane and trying to figure out there. It gets a lot easier here to get everything dialed in here. So now let's take a look at directions. So rudder, we'll just assume that that is correct. Elevators, they should be going in the same direction. They are not. So this is basically if the plane is upside down. So this is my right elevator, this is my left. So we need to go in and make an adjustment to that left elevator. Okay, so according to my chart, left elevator is number 5. So what we're going to do is go into the screen. We're going to go to servo adjust, and we're going to click on number 5. And all we have to do is hit reverse. And see, it switches on the fly. So now we can verify it should be reversed. So that looks good. So now we have the exact same thing on my right flap is kind of going the wrong way there. So we're going to go in there. That is channel number 6. So we're going to go into servo adjust, number 6, hit reverse, and now that's reversed as well. Okay, so we're pretty good. Everything's going the right way, gear's working. We're gonna skip brakes and all that stuff. This is just for basic setup. So you notice at this point that we have not done, there is no gyro going. There's none of that. We haven't gone through the wizard or anything else. All we've done is established a functional aircraft here. Got all of our channels routed, everything else. So let's go ahead and assume that we've installed all of this into the aircraft now. And now we can go in the same place. We can go in into the servo adjust. If you need to do any sub trim or anything else, you can go into this one and you can get your sub trim as you move the stick. This one in particular is an elevator, so if I move the stick, you'll see the values move. So if I want to adjust that travel, so say I want to have more travel or less travel over here, let's just bring that down. Now I'll have, actually you might be able to see that. On that right one, you can see I'm moving less in that direction because we've adjusted it there. So same thing, if you want to adjust some sub trim, let's just make it a bunch of sub trim. Now you can see it's kind of not centered. So same thing, you can do all your servo adjustments in here. You can hit reset if you decide to go back, and it takes you back. So we're gonna set all of our servos up, and the next thing that we're gonna do is go through the wizard finally and set up our compensation, assign a couple more channels, and get everything going the right direction. And as far as gyro is concerned, we're going to go through and assign some channels because we need to have our gyro on, off, or high, low, and off. So we're going to go ahead and hit next. It's going to search for the master switch. So all I have to do, if you remember, we set that in our channel assignments to channel 11. All I have to do is hit the switch on there, and you can see that it found channel 11 just by moving that switch on the transmitter. So that is correct. We're going to hit OK. So this screen is essentially reading your transmitter sticks to tell centers and extent of travels. So we're going to go ahead and hit OK. We're going to stir the sticks and hold it there and hit capture. Okay, hit next. This one is asking us which surfaces we want the gyro to work on. We want all of them. Oop, come on, and hit next. This is the orientation of the smooth flight box itself. Typically, it's going to be upright and front to back. You can put it side to side if you have space constraints in your aircraft. Hit next. This is the type of gyro application you're going to have. I would recommend always doing the sports 3D mode. If you're flying a super ultra scale airplane, you could try it in the other one for scale. Generally, this default mode is going to work good. Congratulations, you're done. So now everything's working, and my gyro switch is in the normal on position. So now if I move this, we'll get you out so you can see this here. So now you can see if I move this way, my rudders are going this way, my ailerons are going, elevators, everything's working. But we've got some flaps going that we don't want gyro applied to. So let's go back in and adjust a couple of settings. Okay, so we need to go back into the smooth flight and we go to channel assign. And let's just take a look. Our master switch is channel 11, that is correct. Aileron 1 is channel 2, that's correct. Elevator master is channel 3, that's correct. I did not adjust a variable gain because we'll talk about gains here in a second. Aileron 2, this is channel 6, which is right flap. My aileron 2 is actually channel 13, so I'm going to go ahead and put this over to 13. And my rudder channel is in fact channel 4. So we're going to go ahead, and nothing else here needs to be done. Let's go back and see what we got. Now, everything's still working, ailerons are working, flaps are working, but now if I move my gyro for aileron, my flaps are not tagging along, which we don't want. So everything is working. Gear still works. Okay, so since we're talking about gear, let's go in and talk about this steering servo. So you'll notice that our rudder and steering servo work together, and they are gyroing together. So you've got gyro on your nose wheel. Now you do want to make sure that you're going the right direction. Obviously, we want to check all the directions of the corrections before you fly, even though you're going to take off on your first flight with the gyro off. But every surface should move towards the direction you're going, except the nose gear. Basically, when you move the plane, the rudder goes one way and the nose gear will go the other. Even as you steer, they kind of go towards each other, away from each other. So definitely double check that nose gear is going in the right way. Yeah. Okay, so let's go in and make some adjustments to that steering servo. Let's go into smooth flight, go into advanced, and let's go to steer switching. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to go, it's asking for the steering output channel, which is channel 14. And our gear up, our gear selector switch. I can't just flick the switch, it won't pick it up on me, so I got to actually set it to channel 8, which is our gear switch. Okay, so now it's asking me for, I can set some values here. I can set some delay. We don't need to really mess with a lot of that. What we do need to do is capture gear up position. So right now my gear are actually up. So they're down there. Gear are up right there. So let's go ahead and hit that and hit return, and I'll show you what we did. Okay, so the gear are down and our nose wheel is working, nose gear gyro is working. Now if we go ahead and put our gear up, it immediately disables. So if I move my transmitter stick now, that rudder isn't working, and also it's disabled on gyro. So if I do gear down, gear down, it immediately comes back to life and the gyro is working again. One last thing on the gyro setup. So let's say I'm moving my plane and my elevators are moving, but let's just pretend that they are back, the compensation is backwards. The direction is correct, but the way the gyro is moving is backwards. So let's go ahead and fix that. Let's go into here, go into smooth flight, go into elevator, and hit invert. And now it'll switch the direction of compensation, but your direction of travel is unaffected, which is nice, because that way we don't have to worry about trying to reverse anything or anything else. Just hit that invert, and you can just uncheck it and go back to the way you were. One thing I want to make sure I cover that's in the newest firmware version of the smooth flight is under smooth flight, and it's turbine filter. So the turbine filter is gonna just help buffer out some of the natural noise and harmonics from a turbine engine. The only time I've noticed any type of a glitch from the turbine is when I was running smoke. Actually, when I would for some reason when I would click on my smoke, it would oscillate the rudder slightly, and you just see some strange stuff now and again. I recommend putting this filter on low. Don't run it any higher than you have to, but low seemed to clear that up right away. So just so you wonder what that is, so just hit low and return. And if you notice some weird oscillations that the gyro changes aren't taking care of, you can always adjust that further. So with your smooth flight, you're going to get sort of a quick start guide. The manual is downloadable on their website. So there's one thing here that I don't agree with, and they're to do with gains. So now leave your auto gains on. Definitely leave your auto gains on. Number 3 here where it says leave the gains where they are from the factory. I find that's a way too much gains. Your plane isn't going to flutter itself to death like some other gyros. However, you do have on the stick, it feels a lot more almost like a heading hold type of feel, which I don't care for. You have to move the stick a long ways to get it to go somewhere. So what my standard startup gains are is on a sport jet. I do 20, 30, and 10. 30 on the rudder, 20 on the elevator, 10 on the ailerons. So if you are a person that is used to using a lot of stick travel, say you use rates and you set your rates so that to do a loop you have to pull your stick way down here, like a pattern pilot or something like that, and you're used to moving your stick a lot, those high gains might work great for you. If you're more of a 3D pilot and you're used to making very small stick movements, the high gains make it feel very dead in the center. And just to face it, you don't need that much gains, because all we're looking for is to take out bumps and ground effect and that kind of stuff. So let's go ahead and set some gains. Okay, so to adjust these gains, once again, we're going to go into smooth flight, and let's just start with elevator. Elevator, what we had, 20 and 10. Let's go low. Let's take that down to 10. And this will go down to 20. We have smooth flight active and auto gain. The auto gain is going to make it so that it automatically dials back the gains if it senses oscillation. So you won't just get you won't do something and all of a sudden your ailerons start flapping away and fluttering. It'll actually sense that, dial it back, and ease it back up. So you likely won't even see it, especially at these low gains. So I'm going to hit that, aileron, 10, oops, we got to, if we go, you'll notice if I start to go down on this, it won't let me go lower than 20 because my low gain is on 20, so I'm going to put that down to 10, and, oh, excuse me, aileron, we want this at, I'm going to go to 5, come on. Well, let me go over in 6, and then this is going to be 10. You just really don't need a lot of gains on ailerons on a sport jet. So, and again, auto gain is active and smooth flight is active, and then rudder. Rudder, we want a little bit more. On a sport jet, a lot of times you'll end up with, when you drop the flaps, the plane will start to wander and sort of oscillate back and forth, because the rudders are usually pretty large, and the flaps usually kind of shovel backwards, if that makes sense. So you don't want, when you drop your flaps, your plane starts doing this stuff. So I run a little bit higher gains on the rudder to kind of help take that out. So we're going to start that at 30, and I'll leave the low at 10. And if it feels like if you're landing and you see your plane bumping and oscillating, you can always adjust these up a hair and play with it. It's easier to go up than it is to go to down, in my opinion. So again, auto gain is on, smooth flight's on. We're going to go ahead and return. So now let's go back out and take a look at the difference on our plane. Okay, so obviously on a turbine setup, you're not going to be using 2-inch arms. You're going to be using maybe an inch and a quarter or maximum. More likely anywhere from 5/8 to an inch. But you can see since we've dialed that down, now we have significantly less movement, and it's more than enough. And our stick is not dead in the center at all. We have very fine control, so we can fly very light on the sticks. I want to take a second to talk about flight modes and how I think they're important for a turbine. What I've done is set up flight modes on my transmitter, and they're set up on my flap switch. So all 3 flap settings are a flight mode. And in that flight mode, I was able to make it so that the trims on the elevator alone don't follow. So say I'm flaps up and I trim my elevator and I go to half flap, it zeroes that back out. And I go back to normal flaps up, and the number goes back. So what that allows you to do is when you're doing your maiden flight in particularly, you can take off, trim the plane, slow down, go to half flap, retrim the plane, our elevator, and then slow down further, go to full flap and retrim the elevator. And that way you don't have to land and go to your flap system and then try to remember what kind of a value to put in your flaps at that number, you know, at that position on your flaps. It just makes it a lot easier. I highly recommend exploring flight modes on your particular radio. So just as a quick demonstration on that, then we'll power this up, and say we're on no flaps and I've trimmed. I'm going to go kind of exaggerate here. So half flaps, say I had to trim this much, and then full flaps, say I had to trim even more. So now it's going to remember those settings when I go to my different flap settings. And you can adjust those, you can fine tune them over your first few flights and get them dialed in how you want. But I think you can see the benefit of that. On that note, generally what you want to do in case it's your first plane or your first turbine, what you want is when you're on flaps, say this is your plane flying horizontally, when you have it trimmed for normal flight, it's flying straight and level. When it's trimmed for half flaps, you might want the nose going down slightly so that you actually have to hold the stick just barely. And then when it's going to full flaps, you'll want to make sure that you're having to hold the nose up a little bit. What that allows you to do is if you're on landing approach and the plane starts to go up, you can just let go of your stick and it'll go back down because it's trimmed to go down slightly. The last thing that you want to do on a turbine or any heavy aircraft is have to push the nose down on landing. It's much easier to be holding it and just let go and then hold it some more, and it gets you a lot better results on your landings. So hopefully that tidbit will help you. Trying to think if there's anything else I missed. I think this covers the basic setup. If there's something I missed, I'll try to do another video. I will post an image of this on my Facebook page when I share this video, as well as a couple other things. I'll probably share a link to the manual. Oh, let's talk one more thing on this gear. So if you're using a JP gear, I don't recommend this controller. It doesn't have even a brake controller. They give you a little weird thing to use for brakes. If you're using JP, go ahead and spring for either the larger JP controller that actually has brakes included and everything else, or just spend the 80 bucks and get an Electron. This Electron controller will do everything except for the nose wheel gyro inside of it, but all you would do is instead of plugging your nose rudder, or it actually just calls it another rudder, instead of plugging it in there, you'll do it like we just did over here to plug this directly in. But this will take care of everything, brakes, gear, everything. The only thing you'd have to do is if you're using JP gear, you'd have to put a different connector on because this has just a 2-pin. And what the Electron does is it uses the outer 2. The inner one is as a non-used pin. So that's pretty easy to do with just a JR connector. And then it's all functional. So, and obviously Electron gear are way better anyway, but if you have a plane that comes with this, it's good to get you going. So hopefully I covered everything. If there's something I missed, you have questions, please shoot me a message, and we'll see you in the next video.